We'd like to thank our sponsors, Ocean Stone Architectural Lighting. Fully customizable track lighting systems for your home, all controlled by an app on your phone. From individual lights to full color spectrum of lights, it's easy to use. You can set timers for special events or seasonal lighting, and what I find really cool are the preset patterns and animation. To get a free quote for your home, go to oceanstonelighting.com.
Welcome to the Quick Tap Rugby Outlier podcast.
I'm Nate Augsburger.
I'm CJ.
I'm Chef Rock.
The podcast that brings you an elite perspective into MLR rugby.
Welcome to another episode of Quick Tap Rugby Outlier podcast. Like always, I'm joined by one of, if not the best scrum half in the MLR at US Eagles in 7s and 15s at San Diego Legionnaire, my man Nate Augsburger. Nate, what's happening?
Yo, big finale for us guys.
What's
big
up?
Finale.
That's right.
That's
Good
right.
to see you.
Last show of the season.
Also joining us is celebrity chef that can be seen, matter of fact, the host of the Chef Rock Show that can be seen on any streaming platform across the United States. Now
That's
it's
right.
on Roku, now streaming on Roku as well. Celebrity chef, host of the Chef Rock Show, Chef Rock.
Thank you. Hey, I want to add on to that. You know that I just this past weekend I was notified that I'm on the Roku channel in the U.S. I just launched in the U.K. on Roku.
Okay.
And also in Canada on on Roku, and also on Tubi TV, which is on 25 different devices. Pretty cool.
Wow.
So you go watch it on your phone, you go watch it on your computer. If you got Apple, TV or any of those platforms, pretty cool.
Well, here's the cool thing about that now is that since you plugged all that, you will be getting a bill for advertising. Listen, so Nate, my man, so this is the final season for our season finale. We'll be back, obviously, the preseason in rugby for the MLR and the San Diego Legions. But I hear you got some special things going on right now. And what are you doing and what are you going to be up to in our off season?
Yeah, so right now I'm getting prepared to release a clothing brand, a sports brand, and it's called Product of Rugby. And that idea is pretty much sparked from this opportunity, being on here with you guys. I was hearing so many great stories, great testimonies of how rugby's worked in certain guys' lives. And obviously we've had a lot of professionals and their lives have been greatly impacted by rugby, but rugby is fed by the community. It's fed by the guys on the groundwork, the guys who might not get to ever wear a USA Rugby jersey. It's fed by them. And I just know that rugby has been a great influence and a great story in my life. And I've created Product of Rugby to kind of bring out other people into the light, see how great we can represent the rugby community and show why we're a special sport.
Awesome.
Congrats, brother.
So I hear there's some charitable things that you're doing with that Product of Rugby. I hear there's something you're doing with charity with that.
Yeah, I didn't feel like it could be a success unless we were gonna give back in some way, form, or fashion. And I love what we did earlier on Quick Tap with San Diego Food Bank, and we partnered up with Legion and we raised some money. And so what we'd like to do is Feeding America's Children. Feeding America's Children. That is the dogs fighting. Feeding America's Children is somebody we'd like to partner with and campaign with so that we could raise money for children all across America. And also find an opportunity to obviously focus some of what we make going towards San Diego community and the kids out here. So
there's a lot of hungry kids in San Diego and around the country.
Exactly. I think we take for granted being in America, right? We take for granted the accessibility to food and people being fed right, and how important that is for how children grow and their health, the way they operate at school and all those things. So man, it's just it'd be a pleasure to be able to help them out.
Nutrition is very, very important.
Right, Chris?
So, and kudos to you, bro. Kudos to you. That's awesome, man. And it's definitely needed, man. So I appreciate your philanthropy, man. I appreciate you not just taking rugby for yourself and making a living off of it, but giving back to the community, giving back to kids. That's very, very important, man. So thank you. Kudos to you for that, man. And obviously I'm going to be sporting the Product Rugby shirt soon and product hat and all that. But I hope you got that in the 5X. You know what I'm saying?
We'll get you any size you need. Any size you need.
All right, Chef Rock.
Would that
Chef
be a little
Rock,
tight?
I'm not going to go
Would that be a
5X
little
with him, but he'll you need to get him a 6X. You know what I mean? I don't know if they make them that big. So, Chef Rock, what you got going on? What's new for you, sir?
Well, I've been trying to, get my TV show all over the place and other projects. So since we've been into this rugby area over the last few years, this is more for CJ and myself, who are kind of learning the sport and everything. So I started joining a bunch of little groups on all the social media outlets. I came across this really cool app called New Gen Rugby. It's an app. You could download it. I believe it's on Apple and Google Play. But it's really cool. It's like an on-air magazine, but it has interviews. It has all kinds of really cool stuff from regular news, international news. It's got gear, so they might even carry your gear there, Nate. And I thought, well, what a great opportunity for us to maybe, get Nate on there, because he's one of the guys.
That's awesome, man.
But plus for us, just to read about it and you could learn more about rugby for young kids.
So download the app and then just go ahead and start playing with it, right?
Well, it's a monthly magazine, basically, a digital magazine. So there's always articles in there. You can go back and look at them. There's a small fee for membership, but really, really inexpensive for what the value is. That you're going to actually get a lot of more insight into rugby, not just internationally, but all the players with some great interviews. It looked like, because I looked through one of the magazines. I'll be signing up later today. But it'll be a great tool for us too, to learn the game and hear about all these other great players that we have on the show and possibly can have on the show, because it's such an interesting sport. I highly recommend it if you're a new. That's why they call it New Gen. So it's more it's for everyone, but the new generation, it'll really help out, because they can learn from all their peers and from some of the masters out there.
All right, talking about the new generation. We talk about the new generation. Our first guest, who Nate's going to introduce, man. Talking about new generation. That's something special.
Chef's talking about being proactive and learning the game and understanding the game a bit better. I like that. So we're going to take it in another similar direction. But I've got on Derek Lipscomb, a great teammate of mine who played at New York City Old Blue. And he's a Columbia University grad, so watch out, guys. Don't be threatened. He's a nice guy. He's just really intelligent.
Oh, so right. I can't talk. I can't do the Mike Tyson words, huh?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, he's played a ton of rugby, guys. He knows the American rugby landscape. He's been a massive contribution in Northeast. He's been a captain and a leader for the Northeast Academy team, which is the feeder into the USA team. And Derek himself has been to a couple USA camps. And so the guy knows his rugby, but even more so, we have him on here. He's created a rugby team called Roots Rugby, which is, it supports. I'm going to let him talk into that. Hey, Derek, how's it going?
How's it going, everybody?
What's up, Derek?
Hey, brother, how are you?
I'm all right. Can't complain, Weather's all right out here in Brooklyn. School's already started, and hopefully can get back into some rugby very soon, back on the field.
Yeah, Derek teaches at the same school my wife used to teach underneath him.
Oh,
and
wow.
At Buckley.
One of my greatest assistants. The boys still miss her, so they still reference her by Miss Cruz. So right before she got married, but if she popped over, I'm sure that their jaws would drop.
She'd give me a couple
road trip.
Yeah, exactly. She'd give me a couple cute stories of the kids being a little taken off guard when she's like, "No, my name's Mrs. Augsburger now." And they're like, "What?"
Who?
It's a mouthful for
Augsburger.
We didn't approve.
I didn't order any burgers.
Yeah, but me and Derek, we met back in 2013. Actually, I was with the Sevens, or I was coming off an injury and getting back with the Sevens. I was fortunate enough to play with New York City Sevens. a team that overachieved. We ended up winning the plate out there. We were playing in Twickenham, Twickenham is like the stadium of the world. It's such a
Hallowed
great place to
grounds.
play. Yeah, it's different level. It's different level, and that's where me and Derek met. And ultimately, he was one of those guys that I was like, hey, I could see myself being on a team with this dude, and moved out to New York City. And we've had a few runs at national championships and sevens, and a lot of rugby played. And Derek himself was a part of Rooney in 2019 and briefly in 2020 as well. Derek, or
Yep.
so
Yeah,
he's
before COVID hit.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll leave it open to him to talk about potentially what 2021 has. But Derek, thanks for coming on. I want to cut right to the chase. I think last week was a special week. We got on topic of racism in rugby, and I shared my perspective of what I've experienced. And I just felt, even in that moment, I was just like, there's someone out there who would have a better perspective of this than me, just as a white dude who grew up playing rugby in Minnesota, whatever. And so I immediately thought of Derek. This is the guy that I thought about, and I thought about Roots and what you guys have going on. And so if you could just give us your perspective, and how are you guys engaging in the conversation of racism around rugby in America?
Yeah, definitely. First, thanks so much for having me on. I think it's always important just to continue the conversation as well. And for me, at least, I've kind of been grounded in racial literacy research for the past decade and a little bit longer. But I'm also an educator, so I get a chance to put these thoughts into practice almost daily. So with that, though, we got a chance, KG, Tiana, Kyle Granby and his wife Tiana, and Kamani Davis, Phaedra Knight, who's also a really big women's rugby player, Tiff Faye, who's also a really great women's rugby player.
You're good company on the rugby.
Yeah, and so we got a chance to really sit down and think through what it is that we really need to accentuate within the rugby community. And one of the things that we recognize is that there's bias. That is something that is natural, but at the same time, what that can do to a culture of a team, but then even going further, how inclusivity can actually be put off to the side for the sake of winning and things like that. And so, with those thoughts, we decided to really be able to hone in more Afrocentric wise, and that's where Roots comes from. It stands for Rugby Offering Opportunities to Succeed, but the big part of that is really highlighting players from the African diaspora on the rugby stage and giving them a chance to kind of play at a higher level. So it doesn't feel like, it's bottlenecking as you get to the top, but rather, give them a few different platforms to play on. So we've gotten a chance at this point to play in a few different states, different countries. London last year. We were supposed to go to Amsterdam this year, but COVID. We were going to go to Kenya and Nairobi, but COVID. So all of those things are on the docket. But the big part of that is also akin to being able to play. You also want to be able to educate those players too. And so understanding where they come from, how their platform can be influenced, and using their identity for positive change within the community too.
That's awesome.
That is like the elevator pitch right there. I would even go so far to say, as this past summer, just given the reactions around George Floyd, Jacob Blake, even paired with COVID, has given a lot of folks a chance to kind of sit and really process what's going on. And, sports, I think, is generally seen as a unifier. It is something that, people come onto the field and, kind of fight together for, a cause. But at the same time, it's really hard to kind of shake what is happening out in the real world when you walk onto the field. And, Black players especially, feel that it's something that is almost visceral at this point. And so Roots is kind of using itself as a platform, but then also as a resource to continue to keep pushing for equality on the field and off the field too within these teams.
Do you find your strategy for exposure different now post George Floyd, or Is it the same as it was pre-George Floyd?
I think it's kind of the same, but we also have to kind of put it in a different context now. I think we've kind of watched athletes from, all over America start to get involved in this conversation, and the backlash sometimes that they face when they decide to speak out. And that's something that Roots pays very close attention to, right? Like activism in sports is something that has a relationship, whether it is a positive or negative one, depends on the person viewing it. But for us, for Roots, we understand that those two should be in lockstep. That if you are somebody that is an athlete, that you should be thinking about your community and the people that you're around. And even if you are playing on a national side or a select side, don't forget those communities that definitely need that outreach and need those people to be able to look up to when you go back home, because these things aren't forever, but you do have to walk back into that space after all this is all said and done.
So let me I have several questions I want to get to, but this one I'm going to ask ahead of time that I wanted to hold this for later. So the NBA was always been sort of involved in community activism and being more than active in outspokenness, if you want to use that word, on Black issues. But now, since post George Floyd, they've been more outspoken about it, and some people calling it, they're overdoing it a little bit, and the ratings have been down. So I don't know if the ratings are necessarily down because there's no fans in the stadium, so you don't really in the arenas, so you don't get the same feel, so you don't watch it as much. I know I don't like watching the games as much because I don't get to feed off the crowd a little bit. Right. Ratings are down. Do you think can you go too far in terms of your or expressing your thoughts to a white American? Because Black America, we obviously, no matter what you tell us, we're gonna feel underappreciated.
Right.
It's just the reality. So white people tell us all the time, "Oh man, I got your back. I feel your pain." No, I'm sorry. You can't feel my pain, and you don't have my back. The reality is, homie, you can walk beside me and help guide me. But, homie, I got to feel better about myself in the situation I'm in. So do you think the NBA is going too far? And how do you plan to, as organizer of Roots, to actually not go too far, but do just enough to make a dent? If that's too much.
No. And I'm very familiar with answering questions just like these, largely just because this kind of goes into a lot of our administration meetings already, whenever we think with what we can do. So over the summer, we've been holding these panels where, for example, we're talking about players and social media and how to balance it. Just yesterday, we had a discussion with local coaches on the East Coast and how they kind of have been processing the summer, but then also how that's going to inform their work going forward. To your point about can you overdo it? I'm somebody that wants to continue the conversation, not, shut down something. So, white silence is something that is very real that, if they're feeling uncomfortable or they're feeling like, they're in deep water, then they just won't talk. Right. And so that actually is not considered a win in my book, because you want the conversation to get to a space where they see your point of view and they're wanting to continue to talk. And so you can definitely hit, a red limit there if, you're constantly talking, but you're not making space for the conversation to come back to. And so with Roots, for example, the big reason why we had these panels is to be able to help out those that do want a platform to discuss further, but then also give them, some space to be able to educate themselves too. And not do so in a way that's going to disparage them or create, animosity down the line. But, as somebody that is an educator myself, I want there to be more discussion. And so that's where you do have to mind, how much power you have in that situation.
Okay. I grew up in Ohio.
Hey, Derek, I got a question in a little story.
Yeah.
Oh, here we go.
You said Ohio. Did you grow up in Ohio?
Yeah, I grew up in Ohio.
Sorry, Chris.
Cincinnati.
I grew up in Springfield, so I used to go to Cincinnati, watch the Red games all the time. Matter of fact, I
didn't hear you.
I mean, my first baseball game.
No, not me. No, Connecticut. Oh, Chris is.
Yeah.
So I grew up in Ohio, and then I used to go to Cincinnati all the time, watch the Reds play. my first baseball game obviously was see the Reds, the Big Red Machine. I still got a baseball bat signed by Joe Morgan, Johnny Bench, everybody. So that's a prized possession of mine. But that's my greatest experience. But I will say to you that in my experience back at that time, there was a lot of racism around that community, especially in Kentucky. And you go into the game, whether it's the Bengals playing or the Reds playing, everybody's in the stadium and they're cheering for it no matter what color you are as a player. But when you step outside the arena, it becomes different. But my question was I was going to lead to before Chef Rock interrupted me, but that's all right. He always does that to me. But the question I was going to ask you is that growing up in that environment where I grew up at, obviously, sports are huge. I mean, cities would actually shut down to go watch a high school football game or basketball game, and at the same time live in a segregated community. And I got relatives that still live there, and it's still the same way. How can we? I mean, no, I take that back. Can't be we because you're the athlete. I'm not. You and Nate are the athletes. How can athletes really change that home environment? Because you can't change when they go to the stadium, because the stadium and the arenas, they root for African American athletes. They support them. They buy their T-shirts. They buy their shoes. But when they get home, they don't necessarily want them living next door to them. That's the dialogue that I want to have happen. Police brutality, it happens all the time. It will continue to happen. And hell, just recently, the one in the upstate New York somewhere, that one of the cops that killed helped the guy hold the guy down was African American. So it's not necessarily so much racism. Cops are just naturally brutal the way they treat people and no matter what. But my thing is, if you don't change the home where people live, then you're never going to change.
It's about foundation. It's about foundation. I'll answer that in a sec, just because I'll get to Chef's
all right
question.
It's my turn.
I'll answer it in a second, though. Yeah.
No, that's okay. Thank you, Derek. No, Nate, I wanted to comment on something. Did you say you guys played in Twickenham? Is that the
Twickenham,
one in the UK?
Yep.
Because when I worked on the yacht in Monte Carlo, they brought the yacht to England for some stupid reason. Well, anyway, we were at Tough Shipyard in Twickenham. We were right there. I used to live in Ham Common, which was, you go over the Thames on a walk bridge, and that's where I live. I was right there. I spent
you're down the street.
So many hours in pubs in that area.
Yeah, that's
There's a few pubs around there.
Beautiful, cool place along the river. My question, Derek, is, going back to your Cincinnati, Ohio days when you were in high school. I mean, you did all the sports, football, you were captain of the football team, captain of the wrestling team, basketball. When did you actually find out your passion for rugby? Was that around when you were in high school, or
it was actually when I got to college? Yeah. So when I got to Columbia, and this is actually, it's funny because it weaves in essentially like the previous question too. Like when I got to Columbia, there was a lot of time, but no time. So you also had to like make good use of it. And so Columbia's football schedule, for anybody out there that doesn't know, you play 10 games, that's it. So there are no playoffs, there are no bowl games or anything like that. But, during that off season, you have all this time to really kind of process what you should be doing. So a lot of times players will go play another sport. Sometimes other players will go straight into the gym and do these things. And so I was at a spot in Cincinnati where, I was a big fish in a little pond. I grew up in North College Hill and surrounded by some really positive people that really wanted me to go out and explore. But I also grew up in a segregated community. And so those people were also understanding that if you really do want to succeed at what you do, you have to leave this space because those experiences are what's going to tie you in even further to Cincinnati. And so when I was over at Columbia, because the off season is the off season, there's not enough to do. And so I ended up joining the rugby team to stay in shape. But because they were year round, I actually recognized that this is actually something that's more feasible for my schedule at school, but then also just for my body. So it wasn't fluctuating as much. And so I stuck with it. But during that time, I was also trying to figure out, how can a place like New York City also be almost in the same space where it's segregated to some degree, just like Cincinnati. And so, that kind of led me down a path where, I'm doing a lot of research, but I'm also kind of seeing what's not there too. And, that's what actually makes you want to pursue it even further. And so to the previous question, it's all about exposure, right? And it's like the more that you can kind of get out in the open about practices that are inequitable, certain policies and things like that. These are things that, really start to allow you to kind of see where the historical patterns are. And so oftentimes you get people that want to focus on the now and don't take these historical policies into context. And that's how you end up actually repeating a lot of these cycles. And so in order to break free and break that wheel a bit, you have to make sure that you're constantly connecting the past to the future, and really being able to draw some of those conclusions, and make sure that you keep researching it. And it's not set in stone afterwards, but rather you have to keep coming back to it. Like, is this still true? Are we still there? And my sister now lives in Cincinnati, and she's doing a lot of the same things that I'm doing now too. So when we get together,
it's one heck of a dinner party.
Very much so. You're right. And our philosophies aren't completely congruent, and we both have different ways to kind of achieve certain things. But the biggest point there, again, to the first point, is that we're always in a space of educating one another and keeping that dialogue open too.
Okay.
Nice.
So for me, I think you answered my questions, and I didn't want to get too deep into politics or
no worries.
issues and stuff like that. I just wanted to get your feel, because I'm really proud of what you're doing and what you're trying to accomplish, and and obviously we wanted to give you as much exposure we can. And anytime you want to come back on the podcast and talk about it, please come on
anytime.
And talk and bring some of your players. We definitely want to give a vehicle, and we definitely want to, in our conversation with Nate, Nate has been, for us, for Chef Rock and myself, rugby is new to us. I'm more of a football. I grew up in football, traditional sports. So as a Chef Rock, and rugby's been something that's been, an eye-opening experience. But the community is really cool, and it's really embracing.
Mm-hmm.
And so for us, the conversation came up, our last episode, because we wanted to see how race is affected. Affects rugby players, especially in America. Now overseas, you hear some rugby players on Twitter and stuff like that they take some heat for standing up. You know what I'm saying? So we definitely want to do that. So I feel honored and blessed to have you on the show. Again, talking about your situation and promoting rugby and roots. And again, we want to have you stick around. We have another guest come on the show, going to talk a little MLR with you and us, and ask a couple questions. And this is Ty. He is actually the host of the Rant podcast, MLR Rant podcast, and Nate was just on that show yesterday, I think, and yesterday it was, and so we thought we have him on, talk about a little bit. This is our last show. We wanted to get him on, but but while we're all together, I just there he is right there. So welcome, Ty. How you doing, buddy? Can you hear us?
He's connecting his audio.
Oh, he's connecting his audio. So
Ty and those guys were a blast yesterday on the run, kick, pass.
Run, pass, and kick.
Run, pass, kick. Had a blast, Ty. How's it going?
All good, man. Thanks for bringing me over to this side, Nate. And as you said, we had fun, so it's nice to be able to continue that and this podcast here with you guys.
Right. So we have Derek on as well, and we have Chef Rock on, and so we're gonna have a big discussion around the MLR and rugby, and we've been getting into some issues a little bit right now about sort of the impact that the George Floyd incident had on rugby, and that it has had on America, but especially sports, and how teams are trying to, NBA for instance, football just started today. So I didn't really get a chance. As a matter of fact, just started while we were doing this podcast. I didn't get a chance to see how they opened up how they give it some demonstration about it. So
the players locked arms in unity and walked across the field. From what I heard when I was listening to the radio on my way here. So it sounds like they did.
Both teams.
They did a sign of unity. Yeah, both teams locked arms and walked across the field.
That's good. So Ty, I'll ask you. We'll bring you into this discussion. This is the question that you probably wasn't anticipating, but how do you feel the impact that what's going on in America today has affected the MLR and rugby in general?
Well, the first thing I think that is important to note, rugby has such great values and sense of community, respect for one another, equality. These values are core to the game. and it's why people are attracted to it in many regard. So I see it as being a part of it. I feel that sports personalities are on a platform where they can share a message that's powerful to them and may resonate with an audience that also shares the values of the sport. Why not? It's your opportunity to do so. If you believe in it and you believe in it strong enough, you should have the right to be able to share it in the way that you feel is good. And do it as a community is even better. And rugby builds a community. So yeah, it's a great way to be able to share your message. It's a powerful one and it's an important one.
Now, with your podcast, with the Rant, is what would you like for it to do for, or what kind of impact would you like it to make on American rugby, or for the impact to make on American fans, should I say?
Well, so the last part of that perhaps being the most important, right, is we want to be able to make sure we add value to the North American rugby fan. So what that means is we don't want to change the perception of the sport. We want to be a part of the conversation to help it grow, to be able to build the awareness at home in the US and Canada and abroad, right? We want to be able to say that here's a great rugby product that is developing very fast, brimming with talent, and you should take note. I mean, if rugby for so many years in the US has been considered as a sleeping giant, this is now the awakening, and we want people to know that.
Awesome.
Are you Australian? Are you Australian, Ty?
No, that's about the worst thing you can say to a South African. Thanks.
Uh-oh.
Sorry about that, mate. That's why I asked. I didn't want to assume.
No, that you were just checking. I know. It's just
One of the skills I will say that you will pick up is that you will eventually start knowing different accents just being on the field. Like you're like, oh, that's New Zealand, that's South African.
Right, and that's the brilliant thing about rugby. Again, it's communities from around the world, no matter what your difference, walk of life you've come from, it's all even once you hit that green field, right?
Yeah, very much so.
So Derek, let me ask you this question. I'm sorry, Chef Rock. Derek, do you feel the same way that the rugby community is really, really inclusive because it's kind of a club thing and it's more played in club instead of like, elementary school up to high school, in schools, stuff like that?
I think one of the things that I pay close attention to oftentimes when, say, for example, MLR came out with a statement about George Floyd, about Black Lives Matter, I'm somebody that focuses a lot on action steps. So what are the things that are in place right now that are going to be able to allow when this inevitably happens again, say Jacob Blake, have there been any improvements? Are there any things that are there that you guys are kind of springboarding off of rather than starting back at square one? A big clue to that is also the comments that show up under a lot of those posts too, because that kind of also gives you an idea of the fans, but then also some of the players too. Some of the players sometimes show up in those comments. And so you recognize that there's going to be a discussion. Not everybody's going to be in lockstep here. But I do think that we are inching towards more progressive ideals in terms of like being more inclusive, not just kind of just saying we're all going to just shut up and play, but rather your voice matters when you walk on that field just as much as it does when you walk off. And it's important that, you have a USA Rugby, for example, MLR has now given, credence to those things and given that platform there so that when a player comes onto the field, whether they play for San Diego, Rugby United, Dallas, you name it, they'll still feel empowered to be able to speak up on those issues and not feel as if, they're going against the grain, but rather like this is a part of, the overall culture.
All right. Ty,
Go
ahead.
I was just going to say how much I appreciate that comment, Derek, because I think when me and you spoke one-on-one, you brought that up, like guys are living with these experiences and these things around them, but yet, and they're expected to be a professional rugby player, but then when they step onto the field as a professional rugby player, they might be asked to actually holster those things, keep them on the side when those are really personable, important things that they have to deal with. They should be able to bring it on the field because it is in a way something that makes them who they are. And they've worked really hard to be on that stage and to be on that field. They deserve the opportunity to represent themselves.
Yeah. And it's all about being able to be your truest self, right? Like if I had to essentially chop off pieces of myself in order to play and start on the national stage, while some players might decide this is the sacrifice I have to take in order to do it, the majority of players would rather be able to keep their whole self as they step onto the field and not necessarily have to like bend over backwards or be somebody essentially that they aren't in order to just be able to get time on the field. And that in itself is a big step, because that explains that, we want more inclusivity here.
I find that funny too, Derek. Sorry, Chef. I find that funny. I find that funny too, Derek, just because like what you're talking about as far as what guys have to cut out of themselves necessarily to be best ready for the weekend, or what they have to cut off. That's a very similar conversation. Doesn't matter what race you are. Like there are certain things that we have to leave off the field at times to get a best performance and whatnot.
Right.
And like, it's not rocket science. Like it's respect. It's understanding each other's differences, but also celebrating how similar we are. Yeah. And it's just like, that's a perfect example right there, right? Like as a white guy and listening to you talk about what a black player might have to go through, or someone of a different race, like those are similarities, man. Like we ride together, we bond over these types of things, So that's also like the conversation, the level of respect that has to come for us to actually have the open-heartedness to say, well, I'm not racist, but am I anti-racist? Am I making the steps, like you said, the action steps to make the difference? And that's something all of us can just answer in our own hearts, and we should. We should have to hold ourselves accountable to understand how we're treating other people and how other people are being treated, what their perspectives are.
Exactly. Couldn't have said it better.
If I may jump in for a moment, and I know I'm kind of coming in at the end of this conversation, most likely, so I don't have a lot to contribute. But definitely I agree with the sentiments that are being echoed right throughout what you guys have been saying, and it's a great and positive message. But from my background, living, born and raised in South Africa, we have about the best and worst history when it comes to racial divide, right? So why I say it's the worst and best is obviously its history and its legacy of apartheid is still continuing today. So when you talk about systemic racism, the worst example I can think of is South Africa, the casebook study. However, sports and politics, whether you want to be able to admit it or not, are both so tightly linked to one another that it's inevitable you would see it reach this platform, because they have the ability to speak to masses. They are role models. And if that message that they can stand forth be a positive one that they affirm themselves, they have the right to do so because they earned the right to be on that platform. So why shouldn't they share the message that's important to them? And it's the same way that South Africa found unity in 1995 when Nelson Mandela came out after 27 years of imprisonment and said, okay, forgive and forget. Let's forget about the hurt. We're not going to forget about the hurt. In fact, let me take that away. Let's acknowledge it, but let's begin the healing, right? And I think those are, Nelson Mandela realized that, and this kind of sticks to your point there, Nate, as you said, think about what we have in common. He looked at, South Africa as a population. I was a young boy. I was 11 years old when Nelson Mandela came out of prison at Robben Island in Cape Town. I remember the moment. I was a part of it. I lived the culture. I was old enough to understand what was going on, although I wasn't old enough to make a difference. But I could see the difference it was making. And that was through the power of sport, because he realizes I don't want to create a divide and I don't want to create an enemy. I want to create a friend. What is the opportunity for me to be able to connect with them on a platform they understand? And that was rugby.
Love that, Ty.
That's great. My question was going to be for both of you guys, either Ty or Derek, and it was more for exactly what you guys are touching on, because I'm always wondering how when the MLR is it's just for the United States, so the players kind of can show a little bit of their personality. But what happens when you guys are playing USA and you're all of a sudden you're in a different country and a different language and a different culture? Did they kind of put the kibosh on, keep your personal opinions to yourself?
Nate would be able to explain that better than I, but from my perspective, I've never had a coach explicitly tell me, don't do this, don't say that. I think part of it is building trust. So understanding that, I can be able to waltz through a conversation and not necessarily make it, polarized, but then also understanding that, like, part of being American itself is the freedom, right? And that expression piece is also important. And so ideally you always want your team to be unified. But at the same time, kind of acknowledging that, like, not all of us are going to be in lockstep, or we're not all going to be congruent. And, just to Nate's point earlier, we still want to be able to respect those differences. And that keyword is respect. And I think, like, oftentimes what ends up breaking down in the communication is the lack of respect. Sometimes on one side, sometimes on the other, when it comes to, very contentious topics like policing, like systemic racism, or, anything to that effect that, America is still processing, still working through. And so, when you're on the national stage, your focus is largely being able to play and represent the USA as best you can. And because that is so paramount, a lot of things do fall by the wayside for that moment. And I think that's just kind of a player's mentality. Like, you just start zoning in. Like, I remember playing in Twickenham, and the only thing I was thinking of was just, like, the guy next to me. And it was just like, and for that moment, everybody in that locker room was the most important thing for me, at least. Like, the minute we walked onto that field, like, nothing else mattered. We just needed to get a W there. And, that a lot, like, along the lines builds trust. And so, like, down the line, Nate and I can talk as if, we were just walking off the field just yesterday. And I think a big part of that is because we've had all of these experiences together. We've experienced one another, and we trust each other to really be able to give an honest and open conversation there too.
Well, Ty, if you can answer it, because you're interviewing players and you've been around the game for so long, you're getting a different look at how that conversation could be out there, because they're kind of looking at you as not as a reporter, but someone that they could talk to outside the game. Do you hear different opinions?
No, I think, as you mentioned now, is that when those guys are, representing their country and at the highest level of the game, they know the reason they're there. And, we kind of touched on this theme, is that you care about the guy by your shoulder, and your left and your right. It's the people there. But now, that's your focus. It's the team mentality. It's one single goal. It's the singular effort headed towards the same direction. At that time, and I referenced this before, the one great equalizer in rugby, it's a meritocracy. All right. It's the best effort on the best day. You put your best foot forward. Everything you can try to hold inside you, leave it behind. Bring the positive energy with you, because that's what you want to carry forward. Everything else can be left back in the locker room, but once you hit that field, you're all equal, no matter where you may come from, what language you speak, what culture you represent, what nation you reside in.
That's great.
Gentlemen, this conversation is interesting, man. It's got me thinking a lot. So I'm gonna stir it back to rugby a little bit, and because if not, I'll go down this rabbit hole of the discussion for hours.
There you go.
And you guys will be like, man, I gotta go. I gotta go. So Ty, who's your favorite team in the MLR, and what do you expect from them this year? And the same thing, Derek, in a minute.
Loaded question.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one. I mean, when you got to be able to talk about them all, you got to try and remain a little biased, right? Remain unbiased.
Unbiased.
Yeah. But so let me rewind. So I had the honor of being the rugby announcer at Rugby Town for Colorado this season. So I always say it this way. Obviously, Colorado is no more. So I'm a free agent as a fan, and I will receive any gifts you want to be able to swing.
Post your resume, baby.
Yeah. I'm undecided at the moment, but I must admit I have been following where the Raptors have found their new homes. So I like to be able to see the boys that are experienced continue playing rugby at home in the US, because they deserve to do so. So I pay particular attention to Dallas and what will eventually be LA, whether they still, come to be the Giltinis or not, who knows. But you can expect to see a lot of the Raptors find their homes between those two.
Nice.
What happened to the Hawaii franchise?
Well, that's a big question, right? It's kind of a he says, she says scenario at the moment, which is not great for rugby. So maybe to best sum it up is that they had this 90-day negotiation period, which actually came as a bit of a surprise. So we were fortunate enough on the Rugby Rant podcast show a little while ago to be able to interview Cam Kilgore, who is the general manager of that bid and that team.
Right.
So in that interview, he kind of outlined, well, here's the structure of our plan. This is how we plan to overcome the inevitable obstacles of travel, accommodation, all these factors that fans immediately just, criticize right from the get-go. And with due reason, however, as the cracks started to show in certain regards with the Senator Wakai, local to Hawaii, had sort of discredited their bid, but he didn't come out and say that. He just kind of cast a little bit of shadows upon it.
Yeah.
And this had entered into the 90-day period where they're going through this negotiation process. It was very quiet. It was very silent. There wasn't much information flowing outside of those conversations. And then the news came that, it wasn't going to be. So we left speculating. What on one hand looked like a pretty sour email response, right? Kind of like somebody who was reacting to a situation from Kanaloa when they had kind of cited their reason as being worries about the finances of the league. I want to address that for the moment. Finances, yes, are a very, very important point to discuss. In fact, I recently covered this in an article I wrote in the MLRfanzone.com. And I kind of highlighted the fact that, yes, we are losing money, but it's a part of the plan, because you have to be able to recognize it doesn't happen overnight when you're developing an entirely new league in an already what is criticized as an overly saturated sports market like the US, right? It's probably the most challenging task. And if it wasn't challenging, Pro Rugby would have probably succeeded in every other iteration before that. So yes, are there mountains to climb? Absolutely. Are they aware of what those challenges are? Absolutely. And are there investors lined up to continue providing a pathway and creating more opportunities for players? Absolutely. There's a list that Killebrew recently spoke about on his interview with Alex Magleby on the Full Contact CEO podcast, where he blurted out a few names that are most likely front runners for the next teams, being St. Louis, Kansas City, Chicago. The list can go on. So confidence is high in Major League Rugby. And Kanaloa, I think, split themselves between a Super Rugby bid and a Major League Rugby bid and couldn't commit to both.
Wow, great explanation.
There. So
That's how you get the real word right there, man. That's how it's straight from the horse's mouth.
That's why I say it.
You Killebrew Jr.
I feel like I just heard a secret.
Yeah.
Tickles the lips.
Tell you what.
Thank you, I'm done.
It's only between us. It's only between us now. That's it.
As a player with Hawaii developing and stuff, it's like there's like two kinds of guys. There's like the guy who sees it and responds right away and starts texting you and it's like, oh my gosh, you seen Hawaii? And then there's like the other guy who like doesn't read any of the headlines. And then there's me just right in between, not biting on anything. And it's like, I'll believe
Wait until all the information's out.
Right in the middle.
Exactly. So to anybody who's losing sleep overnight over MLR, do as I do. Don't lose sleep.
Just like that.
Don't listen to those damn podcasts. What do they know?
No. Listen to those.
No, except ours. And the Rugby Rant, of course.
That's right.
Yeah, I was waiting. Like, you listen to everything except, the rugby.
Yeah. Except. Wow. Hey, Ty, where are you based out of? Ty.
The middle of nowhere. I'm in Iowa, believe it or not.
So you're in Iowa. But when you were in Colorado, where were you? Were you in Colorado? Denver, right? Or someplace?
Well, actually, I was fortunate enough. So how that opportunity came about, so Dallin Stanford, another South African in the U.S. in rugby, of course.
Infamous announcer.
Right. So he gave me an opportunity to be able to, through Rugby Town, to be able to audition to be the rugby announcer. So I auditioned and got the opportunity. And the stumbling block was, well, you're not in Colorado. So eventually they had decided that they were happy enough with choosing me that they were happy to fly me in and put me up every time. So,
okay.
So,
Man,
yeah.
That's
So, yeah, I mean, obviously,
lasted.
Oh,
yeah, I know it was short lived, at least for the season, but it's a great experience. And I'll continue being able to do the same for Rugby Town with all their events coming up. So,
Nice.
the journey will continue.
Wait, hey Derek, you guys, Roots gonna have a team in Rugby Town competing?
I
in rugby?
mean, we were supposed to this year.
Okay.
Had it, yeah. We were gonna, since we're getting invited to all these places. Rugby Town also offered us a spot there as well. So we would have just been just playing there just 2-3 weeks ago. Just given the calendar,
Wow.
which is so next year.
Okay. Next year.
But we are loading up the calendar at this point. So it's just good to see that there will be all these different opportunities for some young stars to be able to play on a very big stage and get some exposure too.
Do they all have to be young? I mean, what's up with 30-year-old scrum half?
I mean, it's real. Again, while we're Afrocentric, and I think it's important to note, while we're Afrocentric, the biggest piece of that is anybody can play, but also understanding that we really want to get some what I would call accomplices, not necessarily allies, but people that want to be able to work with you, because sometimes allies want to work for you, and so we don't want there to be a hierarchy there. We do want to be shoulder to shoulder when we're accomplishing these goals. So and you can't do it alone. So that's the most important part of this too.
Hey, Ty, I got to ask you a question. I heard through the grapevine that you guys were talking about my weight yesterday.
Oh.
Who was that?
That's probably coming from
a podcast
Scott.
off. An eat
Scott.
off, like a hot dog eating contest.
Yeah.
Because I saw one guy on there, he looked about my size.
Yeah, that's Scott, the big guy,
Rob.
New Yorker. So he was talking about the Nathan's hot dogs.
Yeah.
Throw him under the bus,
you'd
man.
be up for a challenge, that's for sure.
Okay, I'll have to warn you.
I've had
I'll have to warn
used
you. I can put them away.
Yeah, this concept for me, obviously there are culture shocks whenever you move to another, even city, but obviously when you move to another country. And it's not to say that America itself is so different from anywhere else. You could argue that most parts of the world are Americanized in some way. But this culture about all you can eat, I've just never seen it anywhere else in the world as far as you can eat. And it's massive. I didn't even know. Honestly, I only realized that the Nathan's hot dog eating contest, was a big thing. Maybe a year or two ago, and ESPN covered it.
Oh yeah, no, it's amazing.
And it happens right down the street from me.
Yeah, that's right. Right there in Coney Island. Hey, I got to tell you guys a quick story because I didn't get to tell a story. So
There's never a quick story when it's shit right, though.
I always got a story. Well, what happened was years ago, Johnsonville Brats was one of my sponsors, me and my partner, when we were the Clever Cleaver Brothers, right? So we became the grand marshals at, believe it or not, Brats Day is a huge thing. There's 100,000 people gather to eat brats and listen to music and play. So we were in the parade, and then they said, we're going to have the first ever brat eating contest. Would you like to join just for fun? So the limos are pulling up, the guys, Joey Chestnut, all these guys are coming out that nobody knew of. And this was quite a few years back. So we go there and they're all lined up and they're eating. There's 50 guys in the contest. So I'm sitting there and they're feeding me brats, they put them in front of me and I'm woofing them down and I could eat. And I eat my 8th brat, which is a lot of brats, in 10 minutes. So I'm shoving them in one time I had 4 stuck in my mouth. I couldn't even chew them.
God.
And we're goofing around. So I lose, of course. I turned right before they ring the bell. They ring the bell, and there's a guy sitting next to me with a mohawk and a wraparound glasses. He competes still today. And he looks at me, and he's got his cheeks all full of brats. And he looks at me, and I look, and he just turns his head and looks at me, and I go, dude, are you going to throw up on me? And he goes, nope. And he ate 17 brats.
Oh, my God.
17 in 10 minutes. The winner won 19. And I'm going, man, I don't know. how do these guys do it? I mean, you've watched that
You would have felt
girl.
terrible.
She weighs like 80
Yeah.
pounds. She ate like 400 hot dogs. I don't know how many she
It's
ate.
always the skinniest dude that ends
It
up
is.
winning. I've
Where does
noticed.
it go? Where does it go?
Chef, thanks
There.
for highlighting our proudest American moments to be known for
Right. This is your
scarfing
great
down
culture.
brats and hot dogs.
That's right.
Hey, yeah.
Not throwing
Hey,
up
yeah.
on national TV. That's the goal.
That's it. That's it.
Listen,
American culture 101.
God. Gluttony 101.
We're running out of time, so I want
Oh
to
my
get
God.
Derek's answer on the MLR and his favorite
It'll be
team,
fun.
and then a couple more questions, and we'll get up out of here because I know you guys are getting tired of sitting. But I really appreciate your patience because this episode was really important to us to discuss the things that we discussed already, and you know it means a lot to us and to our fan base and to who we are. So go ahead, Derek. Give me your spiel on who's the best and what you expect from the MLR this year.
I mean, I'm not even going to pretend to be unbiased. Rugby United for me is a program that I do think is doing a lot to kind of to use what they've done in the past to kind of inform what they're going to do in the future, right? And so coming off like, you know, a really great inaugural season and then this year getting cut short, like, you know, there's a lot of like potential there to do some great things. And like, you know, I have love for San Diego and New Orleans, especially just because like those are teams that, you know, are really great, like
Oh no.
structure. There's great staff, is coaches, administration as well. And like, you know, the outreach piece is big for somebody like myself too. And it's a great model to be able to, for all MLR teams to be able to follow there too. Not to mention, like, I do think that Rooney's making some great pickups in the off season and now has like, you know, a pretty good strengthened program, being able to practice down in Wagner and Staten Island and using that facility and having it be housed there and not have to worry about going on to Randall's Island. For those that are listening or watching, what have you, like Randall's Island is a beast to practice on because I feel like it used to be a parking lot. And they put turf over it and painted it green.
It's pretty miserable.
Good luck to everybody else. So it is not, and especially in the winter when, you know, the water like also generates its own breeze and you're running around in short shorts trying to like, you know, full on tackle. So for me, at least, I think the world of Rugby United, and I do think that, you know, they're always going to be a competitor every year that they're in there. So that's my.
That's where they get their grit from, huh? The tough winters out there.
Yep.
To prepare for the
Concrete
season
made
of
by
rugby
Mike
out
St.
there.
Clair himself. Yeah.
So Todd,
Yeah.
this podcast for us, myself, Chef Rock, and Nate, and has been eye opening, and it's been rewarding. This is our first season. This is our final show before we go on hiatus, and we'll come back. We'll come back stronger. But give us some ideas. Give us your thoughts. I know you've said before that you appreciate all the love and respect and the loyalty you got from the fans for the rant and, you know, through your trials and tribulations. Give us your perspective on how that makes you feel, because I can tell you right now that this the people who send us and DM us on Instagram, it makes me feel good about, you know, at least I'm doing something right. And people tell us they listen to it at work and stuff like that, and it makes us feel good, you know. And one is that Nate gets the opportunity to spread the word about the MLR in America, and then able to have this conversation with Derek, who actually is running the team, you know, that's trying to be all inclusive. You know, matter of fact, they've reached a level. I'm proud that I'm more than proud to even say I know him now. I'm gonna now say he's my friend. You know what I'm saying? So
We definitely are.
So this.
I mean, you're from the 513, so we're always blood at this point.
there you go.
So tell me how the rant means, what it means to you, because this means a lot to me.
Well, I mean, you covered a lot of the important points there. Is that, you know, it's humbling is the words that I use, because, you know, you do what we do out of passion. And, you know, I said the same thing to Nate on the rugby rant last night, in fact, that passion is probably one of the greatest fuels there is. It's the greatest motivator. But what keeps you motivated is when you start hearing some of that feedback and your message is starting to resonate and people find value in your contribution. And you want to be able to give more. And I wish that if every rugby fan had a little more of that same feeling, they would all give a little bit more as well. So if we can give them the opportunity on the rant to be able to join us, which is one of the key features of what we try to do, is to give the fan a voice, to give them a platform to be able to share their thoughts. So we actively invite them to join us on the show, and they can rant whatever the topics may be. Now, in the format that we had with Nate, we call that the run, pass, or kick, because they have 3 options with each question, and that's an interview style. The rugby debate shows are for the fans, that they'll come on and they'll talk about the issues. You know, what is plaguing rugby in America? How do we improve growth? How do we include inclusivity? And we'll hear from those guys that are at a grassroots level, the guys that are going to the practices every Tuesday and every Thursday night to be able to train with their teams, or to be able to get out there and build programs with schools, because those are the guys that are doing the hard work. My job's easy. I just get to talk about rugby.
Right. That is easy,
So true.
You know, I just wanted to mention that, you know, rugby, you know, when I came out to California, there was the Yambak rugby area down there in Point Loma. So I used to watch some of the games, and I thought, how cool, because these guys were so inclusive with their groups. I mean, both teams would be hugging, they'd be drinking beer after and hanging out. And I kind of missed that from high school sports. You know, I went to a culinary school, so we didn't have any football. We played flag football.
Culinary high school?
It was all a bunch of dudes who were the cheerleaders. You
Really
know,
are chefs.
beef stock, roo, beef stock, leaky soup, go for touchdown.
Man.
You know, I mean, it was a different world. But when we got connected with rugby here, it kind of made me feel like a little, you know, like part of that group again, because you guys are so great. I mean, you guys are everything that I was when I was in high school, you know, with the team and camaraderie. And you miss that in life. And to bring it back, you know, I'm, you know, getting older, and, you know, I can't get out on the field and play, but to watch Nate play, and I'm sure, Derek, I'll have to watch some footage of you. You know, me and Chris are like living through you guys, but it's like now we feel like we're part of the team, you know?
You are.
And I love that. And I thank you guys for giving me, at least me anyway, the opportunity to be part of it. So that's pretty cool. I know it's the end of the season. I'm going to cry. No, but no, this is good. This is good stuff, baby.
We always at the end of the show, we give everybody an opportunity to say something and leave a message and leave something inspirational behind. So I'll start with you, Ty, and then with you, Derek, and then Nate. And so give us something inspirational that you would like to leave for our audience.
One of the best questions that I've had to answer on my show, the Rugby Rant podcast, is I was asked, what can the fan do to be able to help the league grow? And it's an important question, and there's a couple of things, and it's pretty simple. 1, make sure you go buy a ticket and watch a game. 2, bring somebody with you new to the game, and bring your kids if you can too, because that's the next generation. If you can't afford to be able to go and watch a game because it's too far away or it's just not convenient for you, make sure you're at home watching that game with your paid subscription, because all of these things are great contributors to viewership, which will secure sponsorship, broadcast deals. They all have a great ripple effect, but it starts with you as the fan being the most important component.
Awesome.
Very well said.
Derek?
Yeah, sure. You know, for anybody that is wanting to know more in terms of, like, you know, race in general and you know, being able to navigate the social climate that we're in here in America today, you know, I created a website. It's called thework.education. So you can type that straight into the address bar, thework.education. And it's just got plenty of resources. It's free. It's a great chance for anybody to get the conversation started. But then, you know, for anybody that is already kind of getting into it and having these discussions, how to carry it further. And so I use that to inform my work. But, you know, I'll leave you all with a word that continually, like, grounds me throughout this research. It has been something that, you know, I do hold dear. I've actually never shared it with, you know, anybody until, you know, today, but the word itself is called Ashe. And so it's a Nigerian Yoruba word, and it is largely focused on, you know, the power of change through action. And so that word, sometimes I say it to myself just to make sure that I'm grounded in whatever I do, whether it be in the classroom or on the rugby field, but even in the community with roots and things like that. But Ashe, it's just something that,
Ashe.
So, you guys can practice saying it, and just, whenever you do say it, just roots is on your mind at that point.
Nice. Nice.
Awesome, Nate. This is our last show for the season, man, before you get ready to start working out for your season.
Wow.
Some final thoughts for the season finale.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a lot of thank yous go out. I'd start by thanking our producer, Tom, who's behind the scenes right now doing his
Big
job.
time.
And CJ and Chef, these guys have mentored me all the way. They've been helping me out along this, getting used to being in front of cameras, getting used to doing we've done promos by this point. We've done a lot of different things together, and it's just been so fun to have you guys on and be able to create a podcast, which ultimately took us in the direction that I wanted the podcast to go in, which is for, the existing rugby fans, but also for the new fans, and particularly new American fans who want to hear the game and get to know the game. And I thought no better than to get a couple raw American dudes on here and let them ask some questions.
Couple overweight old guys, huh?
Hey, get some dudes who love a little bit of contact. And
I'm husky.
Yeah, so getting you guys on, man, it's just been a blessing. And I think Ty said it earlier. It's really humbling when you get to be the one with the mic and get to go out there and be the one who moves the game forward in a different avenue, a different way than me getting out there on the field, trying to lead by example for any kids watching or for my teammates, whatever that might be. So yeah, I'm just really appreciative that we've had such a great season. I thank you to all the guests, the guys who've come on, and I know that there's kids out there who have listened to our podcast who have just been inspired or encouraged, or at least, I've learned a little bit more about the people that they're watching on the weekends and the guys who go out there and do the damage, so that, a massive thank you to those guys. And then lastly, I just think, around, I think having the opportunity to talk a bit about racism in rugby. And it's funny, we talked about like played out, overplayed too much. And to me, really there's no point that's too much when your intentions are in the right spot and you're looking to do what you think's best. And for me, I think as a white dude who grew up in America, there's a lot of our old American values that are being put under attack, and rightfully so. And I think the best thing that I possess right now, in the position I'm in, being around rugby, and especially influencing the rugby community, the best thing that I can do is have a open heart and honest respect in these conversations, and focus on how I will be very proud American when things turn different and go the other way. And now we're living in a completely different world where there's true social justice, there's true equality. And I'm a believer in God, guys. I believe God's going to do it. He's going to use the right people to do it. So I'll say that. But if you listen to this podcast, just find it somewhere in yourself to think about where you're at, what your position is, because racism in rugby is out there. It's here in America. It's out there in the world. We have received messages with a couple of examples. So it's out there, and our rugby community is just too strong, too good to be falling into that category of kind of turning a cold shoulder to it, or not having the courage to step up. So rugby's a bold sport. I'm here to show everybody that. And just really appreciate you guys coming on today. Derek, Ty, you guys' messages, the insight Ty was giving us there. I don't even know if he's going to have a job tomorrow.
That's an inside scoop he gave, but it was a good one.
That was inside. Yeah. No, I'm only kidding with you, Ty, but really guys, I appreciate you. That's all I can say. I appreciate you.
Thanks so much.
Hey, Chris, I'll say a last couple of things, then short and sweet, and then you can close out the show. I wanted to thank, obviously, CJ Nate and Tom, our producer, giving me the opportunity. This is a great opportunity to give new people like Chris and myself an opportunity to get into the heads of rugby players, like Derek, and then Ty, who knows more than me, can express themselves. And it's to me it's heartwarming when we finish these shows. You think, oh, I just go back into the kitchen and cook something. Well, I do, but that's a different story. But what I really like the fact that I can come away with some knowledge, like we always have something to talk about: racism, COVID, whatever the situation is, personal. We've become friends, and to me, that's the best part of this. And I will keep it short. I see CJ going. He said short and sweet. There's no short with that guy. So no, I just wanted to thank you guys personally, because I don't, we never really discussed that after the fact. But now I want to thank Ty, man. Hey, we're gonna have a food cook-off and eat-off between your podcast and ours. I think that'll be a cool show.
I'll make sure it happens.
Okay, we got to do it. And Derek, man, you're one smart guy. I mean,
impressive guy.
I really enjoyed listening to you. I mean, it's heartfelt. I could feel everything you said. And that's what our show is all about. That's what we want. So yeah, I thank you guys, and we look forward to a new season coming up in December, I guess.
Yes.
And love you guys.
So he didn't understand short and sweet. So I'm going to make it short and sweet. Gentlemen, Ty and Derek, thank you very much. We are blessed to be in your company. The podcast has been a blessing for us. But I will say this and leave. I got a DM not too long ago for Nate, and it was saying how this young kid was saying how much he's influenced him and how much he admires him. And I was touched by that, because you don't need to have a million people listen to you to have an impact. Right. It's if you can reach one person. And, right. And so for us to have reached that young man, and he felt the ability and felt the desire to reach out to us and tell us that was pretty amazing. So for me, that sums up everything that we've done. We're going to come back bigger and stronger next year. Obviously, Ty, we're gonna put something there and do some sort of online, or if it's still online, we'll do a food eating contest to open up the season or whatever for us. We'll do something with you guys, man. So we always do this thing called Quick Tap Out. So, gentlemen, thank you very much. God bless you. Quick Tap Out.
Quick Tap Out.
Great season, guys.
Thank you.